يا لطيف. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقضينا إلى بني إسرائيل في الكتاب لتفسدن في الأرض مرتين ولتعلن علوا كبيرا فإذا جاء وعد أولاهما بعثنا عليكم عبادا لنا أولي بأس شديد فجاسوا خلال الديار وكان وعدا مفعولا ثم رددنا لكم الكرة عليهم وأمددناكم بأموال وبنين وجعلناكم أكثر نفيرا إن أحسنتم لأنفسكم وإن أسأتم فلها فإذا جاء وعد الآخرة ليسوءوا وجوهكم وليدخلوا المسجد كما دخلوه أول مرة وليتبروا ما علوا تتبيرا عسى ربكم أن يرحمكم وإن عدتم عدنا وجعلنا جهنم للكافرين حصيرا صدق الله العظيم. Allahu Akbar. Honorable elders, respected brothers and sisters. The discussion that we have been having, for those of you new to our halaqah, is the history of Palestine, Aqsa and Bani Israel. It is this theme that we have been looking at since the beginning of Ramadan. Therefore, it is something that perhaps I thought would be of benefit to inform you of the topic so that you are able to relate to the discussion that inshallah we have today. And those brothers who have been regular, they know what we are talking about, and inshallah they will be able to continue where we left off yesterday. Bismillah. As I have said many times, history is one of the important aspects of the Quran. The Quran relates, speaks, and reminds, especially the sacred history. There are nations that Quran has spoken about. There are nations that Quran has informed us of about their past and also their destruction, their rise and then their falls. All of that, it is something that we see throughout the Quran, many surahs of the Quran talking about it. One of the communities that Quran has given great focus to and on is Bani Israel, the children of Israel, alayhi salatu wassalam, the Prophet. So that is just for you to be able to inshallah keep in mind. Now the discussion that we had yesterday was about the involvement of Jews secretly in Europe and their active role in the Reformation movement and how they were able to influence Europe, they were able to influence European society, economy, politics, religion, and the rest. And I mentioned the many denominations within Christian tradition that hold certain beliefs on the basis of their theology, among them being this group that is known as evangelicals, who are called and known as the Christian Zionists, who support, advocate, and promote this idea that Palestine was given permanently, forever, by God to Bani Israel. And therefore, they do whatever they are able to actively facilitate that vision and facilitate this dream of Bani Israel, this dream of the Jewish community. And I mentioned one of the reasons behind their interest and facilitation of this goal of Jewish community is because the Messiah that they are awaiting for, they believe, we also have things, similar, that he will not come until unless this community is gathered in that land. Now I want to speak today about another very interesting, bizarre, historic event that unfolded and that shaped the Ottoman history and modern Turkey and the Ottoman sultans and the rest for centuries to come and to present date. May not be much, but definitely up until the time of the collapse of Ottoman Empire. And this is the discussion that we had yesterday and the day before yesterday was Europe and European nation and this community in Europe, right? But this is altogether different, but on a similar note and something very similar. But this happened in the Ottoman lands, in the Muslim lands. And there was this conversion that took place. And there was this individual who was the first one in this regard, and he laid the foundation of one particular movement which really shaped and changed the course of Ottoman history and Ottoman power in the subsequent period. And who he was and what was his vision and as to why did he do that, it is this that inshallah, by the tawfiq of Allah, we will look at. And you can see how both of these events are quite similar to each other, serving the same goal, but in two different places, in two different time frames, etc. The person who was a very iconic, popular Jewish rabbi, and it was him who was born in Ottoman land, in Turkey, modern-day Turkey, and he was raised in that land and also died in the Ottoman land, not in Turkey, but somewhere else. And he spoke Arabic very fluently, a very smart person, a very intelligent man, very charismatic and very influential. And it was Shabtai. His name was Shabtai. It's a very complicated, difficult name even to pronounce. In 17th century, the century that we looked at yesterday was 15 centuries onward. The Reformation movement in Christianity was in the 16th century, especially the Protestant movement. And this is about 100 years or so apart from that incident. But this was playing out in the Ottoman land, not in Europe. Like I said, Turkey and its surrounding. But of course it had an effect on greater world map, especially dealing with this community. So this man by the name of Shabtai, he was a Jewish rabbi, a very intelligent young man who studied. There is this movement, a very secret movement in the Jewish tradition. It's called Kabbalah movement. Kabbalah movement, those who know, they know. Those who don't know, they don't know. But it's a very mystic movement. It's a very mystic movement that believes in the hidden meaning and the message of the world and God and the secrets that the tradition has, and it is very restricted only to those who study it, and they are not even allowed to discuss or disclose it. So it is this Kabbalah movement, and by the way, it is, Allahu Alam, to what extent it is true, but this is something that is quite known in many academic and also religious circles, that many world leaders are in one way or the other part of this Kabbalah movement. There is this influence even to this date in our time that the world leaders cannot break free from that. So back to the individual that we were focusing on, Shabtai, he was born in Turkey, and then he was raised as, of course, a very educated religious figure. And at a very young age, he started studying this Kabbalah mysticism and he developed passion in this regard. And as I mentioned yesterday, we have in our tradition the belief of the Masih ad-Dajjal, the Messiah that is to come. But that belief is not just limited to Islam, but it is also something we see in Jewish tradition, that we see also in Christian tradition. And I mentioned that yesterday. So this individual who has studied, of course, the tradition, knowing that there is this figure that exists who will be the savior of the Jewish community, restoring the glory of Jewish community, and bringing them back to their lost dream land that is, of course, the kingdom of, Jerusalem. So that was their dream. And that is what they believe, that, when he will come, he will be able to restore that. So he had this interest after studying that, but when he started to exhibit and speak out some of those types of things that people did not, especially the rabbinical group, did not accept him. Rather, they opposed him, and so he was kicked out of his city. So he started traveling at a very young age, more often so between Egypt and Palestine. So in between these two places, he would travel frequently, and with his mission and also preaching, he would gain support, especially in the, of course, Jewish community across. And this was the same time, 16th century and 17th century, when the Jewish community was facing pogroms and persecution in Eastern Europe, especially Ukraine and that part of the world. Hundreds and thousands of Jews being persecuted and literally massacred. So after the destruction of Second Temple, so they had been homeless, basically, like nomadic type, and traveling from place to place, not being able to integrate or settle and live, being forced out, driven out, from one place to the other. And we talked about France, we talked about Germany, we talked about England, and also Eastern Europe was the same, and even Russia had the same issue, same thing with them, same type of policy. So the way he charismatically expressed that this messianic figure that is to come is going to liberate you and bring you back to your homeland, bring you back to this kingdom of Jerusalem, and bring you back to that place that you and your ancestors have been longing for. Obviously, this is something that you would love. This is something that you would love as a normal human being, even. Right? So people started to believe in him. So as he traveled during his travels, he met one individual, especially in what is called Gaza today. But of course, Gaza was not as small as it is today. Gaza is like a small strip today, right? But in those days, Gaza was a big portion of land, which over time scorched and cut down to this small portion, small size. But it wasn't. Gaza is not something new. It is very, very ancient place. If you look at the books, you find the names. Even subhanAllah, this place was the place where even our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's grandfather, not the Hashim, because they used to go to, they used to travel frequently in between Arabia and Syria for trade purposes. So Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's great grandfather, Hashim, so he traveled, and during his travel he was there while he died. So he was buried in Gaza. So that's the place of his burial that became the site of his burial. So Gaza is not a new name or a new place. Historically speaking, it really holds a very important position. And therefore there was this individual, a Jewish rabbi, another one, who was in Gaza, and he is known as the Nathan of Gaza. So when this Shabtai met with him in Gaza, explaining his vision and dream and whatnot, obviously, so this was the first individual who himself being a rabbi, although others rejected him, who supported him and accepted him to be as the Messiah of the time, the awaited one. The awaited one. So, and then he said, then you, because being the Messiah, you will be able to turn over the Ottoman Empire or the Ottoman ruler and liberate Palestine that is under his control, be able to restore the glory of the land for your own community. So he reassured that by saying that you are that promised Messiah. Of course, others saw him to be as the false Messiah, but he assured him. And then he actively promoted him to be as such. Who? This Nathan of Gaza, this rabbi. And in his favor he spoke, because he took him out. They had this private meeting first, then he took him out, in the streets, where there was a Jewish community. Said, he is the promised Messiah. And so follow him and believe in him. And again, when you are really a powerful speaker, when you are very charismatic and you are very eloquent and intelligent, laymen easily fall prey to those types of, very passionate speeches, and then they become influenced by that. So he was able to gain the support. Now with that, of course, as he traveled to Egypt, he gained quite sympathy and support, and in between, and also this movement had even effect in Europe, because European Jews, they were already going through what they were going through, and they needed a kind of messianic figure to bring relief to them, with this idea that you will be able to return to your kingdom. And that is what he did. And then he traveled, and then this individual, the Nathan of Gaza, he wrote letters sending off to the Jews of the world, saying, you need to believe in him and support him, so that he could fulfill the dream. And lo and behold, you will not believe that because of that letter and because of his personality, many Jews started to follow him. He became a very powerful figure. And with that popularity, as he traveled, he gained some support. And there were Jews who literally sold off their properties. Wherever they were, they sold off their properties, and they were ready to make the hijrah at moment's notice, moving and migrating to Jerusalem to be able to settle and live there. So because of the gain and the support and the popularity and the acceptance of this individual. So, to cut long story short, so this individual, Shabtai, he then traveled from Gaza and Palestine to Constantinople, of course, Constantinia, Istanbul. And with this vision and the goal to take over Sultan, the Sultanate Osmania, because it was this that was said, because you will take over, and with that you will be able to take over Palestine. So with this intention he traveled, and as he arrived in Istanbul, of course the news had somehow broke out, and upon his arrival he got arrested. And with that arrest he was taken to the palace of the Khalifa, and it was the Khalifa Muhammad the fourth Muhammad of the Ottoman Empire. So Adrianople was the place where his palace was. So he was brought into the palace. And when he was brought into the palace, then it is here that you can see how things played out. So as he was brought into the palace, because the popularity, support and gain and the vision that he had, that he was spreading actively, that I'm the promised Messiah and that I'm going to bring you back to this place and whatnot. So Muhammad the fourth, the Khalifa, when he had him in his court, he face to face asked him, these are the claims that I have heard that you make, and then you are causing great commotion and unrest in the empire, because much of it had to do with the Muslim land, Ottoman land. Right? Of course, it was very big Ottoman Empire back in the days. So he acknowledged when he acknowledged, yes, I am the promised Messiah, and that's what the dream is, and that is the goal. Not necessarily to take over, but the dream, when it was confirmed, so he said, I now give you the ultimatum. The ultimatum is that, you will be executed. You will be executed, basically, death penalty. That was the decree that the Khalifa, the Caliph, issued, saying, the ultimatum for you is that you will be executed. And then, so he gave him basically one of the two choices. The first choice was this, or I shall forgive you if you convert to Islam. Or I shall forgive you if you convert to Islam. So death, between death and the conversion. So these were the two choices given to him. And lo and behold, this individual that was so popular and so messianic in his personality, who was supposed to fulfill the dream of the Jews, to build the temple, to liberate Palestine, to liberate Jerusalem and whatnot. Now, in the presence of people, as he was given that choice, because back in the days, your dress code will also be a part of your identity as to who you are. Christians will dress differently, Muslims will dress differently, Jews will dress differently, especially the religious class. So he was dressed up like a rabbi. So he was wearing a Jewish turban. So in the presence of the people, when he was given the choice, he took off his turban and he put the Ottoman Muslim hat, and then he recited Shahada. He recited the kalima. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So it really shocked the entire community that was following him, that was following this individual and ready to make any sacrifice to migrate. And there were many who had already sold their properties, just waiting for that final message to come so that they could make their move and migrate towards Jerusalem. So it really sent a serious shock waves across. But it is here that you can see, so when he did this, he said, this was God's will that I convert. This was God's will that I convert. So with that, and he took the name, instead of being called as Shabstaisvi, Aziz Muhammad Afandi. That's the name that he took on onward from that time. So the Khalifa Muhammad IV, of course, seeing him, number one, as a threat to the Khilafah, number two, a threat to Palestine itself, number three, the unrest that he had caused across, he honored that conversion and gave him a big position in government. And then, of course, he was given privileges and honor to live by and to continue his life. So this happened, and then this was in the face of the public. Now, going back to what we heard and discussed a few days ago, this was the tactic that they had adopted in Europe, when, especially in France and elsewhere, when they were forced either to accept death or banishment from the land or conversion to Christianity. So they had a portion of them had converted to Christianity secretly, right? And secretly they maintained their religious identity. So the same message was given to his followers in Turkey, in the Ottoman lands, especially. Along with him there was a number of Jewish communities, like at least 300, they say, 300 families converted to Islam along with him. But again, he said, do as your ancestors did in the past. Do as your ancestors did in the past. You express Islam outwardly, but maintain your identity, secretly. So it was one of the very bizarre, awkward, interesting type of convergence in the history of Islam, when a very popular figure accepted Islam, on this condition that either you die or you accept Islam. And when he accepted Islam, of course, with that his life continued. So there were a small portion of his followers, left him, seeing their dream shatter. But majority, they believed that was also part of the plan. That this conversion, they believed and saw that as part of the secret plan, as part of this Kabbalic mysticism. So it was him who laid the foundation of this Sabbatian movement. It is called Sabbatian movement. And this movement, the goal of it, of course, is the same: to liberate Jerusalem and to return Jews to their promised land. But this group, in the face of the public, especially in 17th century, they were seen as Muslims, but if you read the history, they were called the group that accepted Islam with him from the Jewish community, along with him, because they were the followers of this man. So those who accepted Islam, they were given this name called Donmeh, D-O-N-M-E-H, Donmeh. This is a Turkish word. Donmeh is a Turkish word that they were called. This whole community that accepted Islam were called as Donmeh. What does Donmeh mean? Donmeh is a very derogatory type of term. I mean, in one hand it means the converts, but on the other hand it also means it was not like a praiseworthy converts, traitor type of converts. Traitor type of converts, because they believed in this very hidden agenda, and therefore the religious community of Istanbul back in the days, they regarded them to be as Zanadiqa. Zanadiqa means those who express Islam outwardly but hate Islam inwardly, like munafiqeen. Those who express Islam, or the followers of Islam, outwardly, but they hide their religion inwardly. And therefore, when this community started to build in, and they had their following slowly but surely increasing, and this Donmeh community to this date exists in Turkey. Of course, they are in minority, not in big numbers, but to this date they exist. Their origin traces back to the Jews, but externally they practice Islam. You will see them having Muslim names. You will see them having the appearance, Muslim appearance. So, but inwardly, so this man, what he would do, he would fast in the month of Ramadan, but he would also observe Shabbat. He will read Quran, but also he will read Judaism, the Jewish books. So he was half Jew and half Muslim, like that, because he did not want to disclose his identity fully. And it was with this intention that they were able to execute that plan that was the same plan that their ancestors had done in Europe. Like I said, to influence, to gain the influence in the society, and to be able to reach to the power, to be able to have the authoritative role in the society, and have access to economy, and to be able to be a great influence on the politics of the land. And so that was the agenda, the hidden one that they had. And they continued to grow and make their way slowly but surely, because externally they were seen as Muslims. But this man who was given these privileges, a palace and power and also governmental position, all of that, when it was found out that he is no longer a sincere Muslim, he was just pretending to be a Muslim, so he was sent in exile. He was banished from the Turkish land, from Turkey, and he was sent off to Albania. So it was here he lived the last phase of his life, and he died in Albania. But his movement, this secret movement, Donmeh movement, continued to exist and continued to work behind the scene as it was intended and planned. And therefore they really had a great influence on the politics of Ottoman Empire. And because it was about, all of this happened in this late, mid 17th century and towards the late 17th century. And then from this time all the way until about 100 or 150 years. Again, with time people start to forget, as I mentioned yesterday. You don't remember the events of history, who they were, or the ancestors, when second generation or third generation comes in. So if you don't revisit the history, if you don't read the history, if you don't revive the history, then you lose the touch of that. So in 100, 150 years, they were able to really challenge and change and shape or even shake the empire in 150 years time frame. So in 1910 to 20 period, which is the beginning of the 20th century. So it was here, as Ottoman Empire was going through massive chaos, crisis at all fronts, territorial, economic, military, religious, otherwise. From all, subhanAllah, in the beginning, how they were full of vigor and chivalry and courage to be able to really challenge the most superpower of the time and take over. But towards the end phase, they had lost all of those things. Right? All of those things. They had really become very, very weak internally and externally, and also the plots, made against them to be able to weaken them and also to break them and to completely destroy the empire, because of this reason that they were not able to infiltrate as a result of. Because the same policy was still in place. We talked about the policy that Salim I and Suleiman the Magnificent, they had enacted that Jews from Europe are not allowed to settle in Palestine. Only those who lived, they lived. But from outside, no one allowed to migrate to Jerusalem or live. Of course, you can visit, but you cannot make that as your primary place of residence. So that policy was still in place. And obviously this dream would not come about and will not be able to fulfill unless these policies are completely abolished. And therefore, different ways were adopted. But within the Turkish movement, within the empire, the movement that really gained a lot of support, a lot of popularity, a lot of strength and power was this movement called Young Turk Movement. It's called Young Turk Movement. We have seen in recent times, in the Arab Spring, for example, in the Arab world, much of it was done by the youngsters. And the other example we have in very recent time is, Bangladesh, right? So young individuals are always very charismatic, and this is why Aristotle says, any nation that wants to bring revolution, the backbone of the revolution is always young blood. You don't see elderly people. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you look at the seerah of Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, majority of Sahaba, those who accepted Islam, those who supported him, they were in their early 20s. They were not like 40s, 50s, 60s. Very few of them. They were all in their very prime years of life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose them to be the supporters of Islam. And of course they were able to make any sacrifice. So young men have always played a very pivotal role in the formation of societies and also in the revolutions. So this movement is called Young Turk Movement. What was this movement? This movement was ultra-secular movement. A movement that had nothing to do with Islam, but all of it was simply because they did not like Islam to begin with. They did not want to have to do anything with Islam. That was their focus. But who were those running or spearheading this movement? Who were the individuals? The individuals, the key figures, the key individuals who were the spearheading this movement, all of them, if not all of them, most of them, they come from this Dawn May group. All of them, if not all of them, most of them, they come from this Dawn May group. And now you can see the connection, right? So you can see that this, within 150 years time frame, where were they and where did they reach? They were able to change and shake and challenge the whole Ottoman Empire. They gained such a support and such a popularity and strength and power. Even the Khalifa was literally like a rubber stamp. Did not have anything, no power left whatsoever. So they really wanted to revolutionize the whole Turkey, taking it to the next secular level that was even in many ways perhaps not competing, even going ahead of Europe. Going even ahead of Europe. So it was this group that was, very key figure, played a very pivotal role. It was 1919 and around those years. And they became further stronger after World War, after the Balkan War. And then the World War I, these wars, of course, they, especially after World War I, there was this situation, unfortunately, because Muslim world had to side with one of the groups, and Ottomans, they decided to support the group that the other opponent group did not like, and so they saw that as an opportunity, and therefore they came about more explicitly about how to really fully put an end to this whole empire. So 1915 all the way until 1918, and 1918 was the year actually in which the last official and sincere Khalifa of the Ottoman Empire was deposed from his power. And 1919 was the year in which this movement, this Young Turk movement, really modernizing Turkey. And like I said, their goal was, because they come from that group, and they want to see this state completely bereft of Islam, abandoning Islam in the name of Islam and everything. And of course, from this group, there was this leader of the group who really became the most popular and very shockingly was seen as the liberator. And he also comes from the very same group, and it is this that Turkey in modern history calls him as Mustafa Kemal. Mustafa Kemal belongs to this group, this Donme group. His lineage, is traced back to here. And it was from here that his ancestors come. Now you can see as to why he did what he did. He was the one in 1919 year and onwards actively abolished the Ottoman Empire, in 1924. Completely put an end to the Al-Khilafatul Usmaniyya, this Ottoman Empire, the last bastion of the Islamic empire and the power that had been in some form and shape continuous from the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can imagine the loss. This is why Allama Iqbal, lamenting on the situation, during those years, subhanAllah, when this whole Young Turk movement, when they were really doing whatever they could to abolish Khilafah, there was sympathetic Muslims across the globe, in Indian subcontinent as well. This Khilafah movement in India, this had nothing to do with the freedom of India. In 1920s, there was this movement, it's called Khilafah movement, Khilafat movement. Maulana Muhammad Ali Jawhar, Maulana Muhammad Ali Shaukat, and many other Muslim scholars and ulama, they were part of that movement, and it was simply to lend support in favor of the Khalifa, the last Khalifa, so that he is able to hold the power and the empire, the Khilafah, to remain in power. So Muslims across the world were doing whatever they could. They raised funds for that purpose, as a matter of fact. This is called Khilafah movement outside of Turkey. So, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasul. So this Khilafat that was on from the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam all the way up until this time, 1924. So it was finally abolished. It was finally put to an end. And of course you can imagine the loss that Muslims faced as a result of that. It was this that, of course, as I mentioned, Allama Iqbal laments on the situation by saying, Chak kar di, Turk-e nada ne khilafat ki khuba. Chak kar di Turk-e nada ne khilafat ki khuba. Sadgi Muslim ki dekh, auron ki ayyari bhi dekh. These are the lines of poetry that he composed. That the garb of Khilafah that was intact for many, many centuries, finally it was torn apart, torn into pieces. Sadgi Muslim ki dekh, auron ki ayyari bhi dekh. Look at the simplicity of the Muslims, how they fell prey to this notion, supporting it actively, while behind the scene it was the enemies who were actively advocating to destroy this. Sadgi Muslim ki dekh, auron ki ayyari bhi dekh. That's the reality. So when this came to an end, this individual, Mustafa Kemal, was the one who was the leader and the head of this movement. And when he was the head of the movement, he made sure, the modern Turkey, even when I was in Turkey, the guide that I had, I felt pity for many youngsters and young generation, because he is called Ataturk. Ataturk is, of course, a Turkish title, a Turkish word, right? It means, the father of Turkey. But he is not father of Turkey. He was the traitor of Turkey. He was not Muslim. He hated Islam. He was not Muslim. And I gave you the dynamics and the details behind the scene. What is his origin? Where does he come from? And what was the motive behind? Right? So this was the biggest catastrophe that was ever done and brought in the history of Islam, especially in recent time. And then you can see after that how Muslim world was cut into small pieces, like a piece of a pie. And Rasulullah ﷺ said, hadith, it was only here it became a reality after the abolishment of Khilafah. What did Rasulullah ﷺ say? Yushiku an tada'a alaykum al-umam. A time is going to come that the world will come collectively to feast upon you. It was never like that. It only happened, this hadith became a prediction of Rasulullah ﷺ, a brutal reality in the aftermath of the Ottoman Empire's collapse, where the European imperial power, they had these negotiations and deals and discussions who should get which country and what part of the Ottoman Empire. And so they literally cut this Muslim world into pieces. Otherwise it was just one gigantic, of course some of the opponents, non-Muslims, when we talk about, Palestine belongs to Palestine, they say, there was no Palestine as a country that existed before. Of course that is true. It was part of Ottoman Empire. It was part of, Muslim world. But as a geographic location, it did exist, and also the rules, this land belonged to them, the people who lived, regardless of whether the country existed or not. This land was for the Palestinians, and this remains the reality. This remains the reality. So this is what we need to focus on. We don't need to get caught up with this, whether Palestine existed or not. Of course, Palestine as a country did not exist. But Palestinians existed. And they, for generations, have lived there. And that is why it is their right to return home and to remain in their place. So this was this Donmei group. And it was this individual who was the founder of the Sabbatian movement, Shabtai. And it is, like I said, a very awkward, interesting type of conversion, which, paved the way for this dream of Khilafatul Usman. Because remember I said earlier, he had traveled from Palestine, Gaza, to Constantinople to take over Ottomans, right? So that was the intention, but he got caught and then he converted. But that dream that he had for himself, his followers fulfilled 200 years after. This is why it is, unfortunately, Muslims, may Allah, give all of us the tawfiq, we get lost in our emotions. But others, they have such a long-term planning that you will be able to even not figure it out when it was planned and how it was connected. Things that we see today happening, it is not overnight plan. Sometimes it is 100 years before, other times more than 100 years before. So this active, this dream that was actively worked towards, had been the dream of many leaders, but for many generations. But of course they are so patient, they work constantly, diligently, without compromising on that goal. And it is this legacy that really, unfortunately, brought down Al-Khilafatul Usmaniyya. So what Mustafa Kamal Ataturk did after he abolished Khilafat, it is something that we inshallah will hopefully look at tomorrow. And then before that, there was one more aspect that I wanted to talk about, but time is limited. Hopefully we will try to touch upon that as well tomorrow, bi'idhnillah al-aziz. If not, maybe the next day. So this is the painful reality and sad legacy that really shaped Ottomans and the Muslim land, once for all. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala restore the glory of the Muslim ummah across the world, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala liberate, Palestine as it is, under tyranny and occupation, especially our Muslim brothers and sisters in Gaza. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Inshallah we'll continue tomorrow. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayh. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.